The steady beeping of the heart monitor echoed in the sterile hospital room, each sound aligning with Ava's rapid, shallow breaths. Pain seared through her abdomen as she clung to the cold metal bedrail, her knuckles turning white. The doctor's urgent words still reverberated in her mind. The complications are severe. This procedure isn't just critical. It's life-saving for both you and your baby. Her heart pounded as she processed the gravity of the situation. Before she could steady herself, the door swung open with a crash, slamming against the wall. Liam stormed in, his face contorted in rage. "Do you think I'm made of money?" he bellowed, his voice sharp enough to slice through her fragile composure. "You expect me to pay for this nonsense?" Ava froze. Her already trembling hands gripped the bedrail tighter as she turned to face him. "Liam, this isn't about money," she said, her voice breaking. "It's about saving our baby's life and mine." But Liam wasn't listening. His furious strides brought him closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over her frail body. "You're always so dramatic, Ava. Everything is about you, isn't it?" His words were venomous, each one stabbing her already fragile spirit. "Why do we even have a kid if you can't handle it?" His accusation struck her like a blow. Before she could respond, he grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking it cruelly. Pain shot through her scalp as tears spilled over her cheeks. "Let go," she cried, her voice a mix of desperation and defiance. But Liam's grip only tightened, his face a mask of fury. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. A sudden slap across her face sent her head snapping to the side. The burning sting on her cheek was nothing compared to the cold realization settling in her chest. Liam's anger knew no bounds. For a moment, the room spun, but Ava forced herself to stay upright. She refused to collapse under his rage. "Stop this, Liam," she shouted, her voice quivering but resolute. "What is wrong with you?" Before he could escalate further, the door flew open again, this time revealing a nurse. Her face was pale, her expression a mix of shock and determination. "Sir, step away from her," she demanded, her tone firm despite the fear evident in her eyes. Liam glared at the nurse, his body rigid with frustration. "Mind your own business," he snapped, but the nurse didn't flinch. She reached for the phone on the wall, her fingers hovering over the buttons to call security. Realizing he was cornered, Liam released Ava abruptly. He leaned in close, his voice dripping with malice. "You'll regret this," he repeated before storming out, the door slamming shut behind him. The impact rattled the room, leaving an eerie silence in his wake. Ava slumped back against the bed, her entire body trembling. The burning in her cheek and the throbbing in her scalp were overshadowed by the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. Tears streamed down her face, unchecked and unstoppable. The nurse, whose name tag read Claire, approached cautiously, her movements gentle as if trying not to startle Ava further. "Are you all right?" Claire asked softly, placing a reassuring hand on Ava's arm. "Let me check your vitals." Ava nodded weakly, her voice caught in her throat. As Claire adjusted the monitors and checked her pulse, her expression remained one of genuine concern. "You don't have to go through this alone," Claire said, her voice steady, but empathetic. "We can help you. There are people who can ensure your safety." The nurse's words planted a fragile seed of hope, but fear immediately overshadowed it. What if Liam found out she sought help? What if he retaliated? Ava closed her eyes, inhaling deeply to push the intrusive thoughts aside. For now, she had to focus on surviving. For her baby and for herself. Minutes later, the doctor entered, her expression kind but serious. "Ava, we need to proceed with the surgery soon," she said gently. "It's critical for both you and your child." Summoning what little courage she had left, Ava nodded. "Do whatever you need to do," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Survival was all that mattered now. The operating room was cold and blindingly bright. Ava's heart raced as the medical team prepared around her. Fear threatened to consume her, but she clung to one thought: her baby. She focused on the rhythmic beeping of the fetal monitor, a tiny heartbeat, a fragile symbol of hope. The surgery stretched into what felt like an eternity. Every second was heavy with uncertainty, exhaustion, and pain. But then, a piercing cry broke through the sterile silence. Ava's chest heaved as tears streamed down her face. When they placed her baby girl in her arms, a profound wave of relief and love surged through her. The infant was small, perfect, and full of life. Back in the recovery room, Claire stayed by her side. "She's beautiful," the nurse said softly, her warm smile a balm to Ava's frayed nerves. Yet, even as Ava gazed at her daughter with overwhelming love, a shadow lingered in her mind. Liam's words and actions were etched into her memory, a stark reminder of the danger that loomed. 2 days later, Ava was cleared to leave the hospital. Holding her daughter close, she made a decision. She wouldn't return to Liam. Not to his anger, not to his abuse. Her baby deserved better, and so did she. Ava's heart raced as she dialed Mia's number, her trembling fingers making it hard to hit the right keys. The line rang, each second stretching unbearably until her childhood best friend picked up. "Ava?" Mia's familiar voice, filled with warmth and concern, instantly brought tears to Ava's eyes. "Mia, I need your help," she whispered, glancing nervously at the door as if Liam might burst through it at any moment. "I can't go back home. Not with him." There was no hesitation on Mia's end. "Come to me," she said firmly. "You and the baby can stay as long as you need." Those words felt like a lifeline in a storm. With Claire's help, Ava packed the few belongings she had at the hospital. Every moment felt fraught with tension, as though Liam's shadow loomed just out of sight. The nurse's supportive presence gave her strength, but the fear of retaliation gnawed at her resolve. By the time Ava reached Mia's apartment, her body felt like it had run a marathon. The small, cozy space was a stark contrast to the cold hostility of the life she had left behind. Mia enveloped her in a tight hug, careful of the tiny bundle cradled in Ava's arms. "You're safe here," Maya said softly, her voice resolute. "No one will hurt you anymore." For the first time in days, Ava allowed herself to breathe. She sank onto the couch, clutching her baby close as exhaustion swept over her. But even in the safety of Maya's home, the fear lingered. Liam's threats echoed in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he wouldn't let them go so easily. The next few days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and whispered conversations. Mia proved to be a pillar of support, helping Ava care for the baby and navigate her next steps. It was during one of those late-night talks that Mia's words struck a chord. "You need to protect yourself, Ava. Legally. He can't be allowed to get near you or the baby." The thought terrified Ava, but she knew Mia was right. She had to take control, not just for herself, but for her daughter. The first step was finding a lawyer, someone who could help her build a case and secure a protective order. The idea felt overwhelming, but Maya's unwavering confidence bolstered her courage. Meanwhile, Liam's presence loomed like a dark cloud. Ava received a barrage of text messages, ranging from apologetic pleas to veiled threats. She saved every one of them, her resolve hardening with each new message. This time she wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. Her daughter's future depended on it. The lawyer's office was stark but welcoming, the scent of coffee lingering faintly in the air. Ava's hands trembled as she handed over a folder stuffed with printed screenshots of Liam's threatening messages and photos of her injuries. Across the desk, Nicole, a seasoned attorney with a calm and focused demeanor, carefully examined the evidence. "This is compelling," Nicole said after a moment, her voice steady. "We can file for an emergency protective order immediately. Once that's in place, he won't be able to come near you or your baby." Ava exhaled shakily, relief and fear mingling in her chest. "And if he violates it?" she asked. Nicole's expression hardened. "Then he'll face serious consequences. The law is on your side, Ava." The next few days were a whirlwind of paperwork and court filings. Nicole moved quickly, securing the protective order within 48 hours. But Liam didn't take it quietly. His calls turned more erratic, his messages darker. He showed up at Maya's apartment one evening, pounding on the door with an intensity that sent Ava's heart into her throat. "Ava, open the door." Liam's voice boomed, echoing through the hallway. "You can't keep my kid from me." Mia was already on the phone with building security. "Stay in the bedroom," she whispered urgently to Ava. Clutching her baby tightly, Ava retreated to the farthest corner of the room, every muscle in her body taut with fear. By the time security arrived, Liam had escalated to shouting threats. "You'll regret this, Ava. Mark my words." He bellowed as the guards escorted him out. The confrontation left Ava shaken, but it also steeled her resolve. She couldn't afford to back down now. Nicole was furious when Ava recounted the incident. "This strengthens your case," she said firmly. "We'll push for supervised visitation only, if any at all. He's proving himself to be a danger." As the custody battle loomed, Ava found herself alternating between fear and determination. Mia remained a constant source of support, and Nicole's confidence in the case gave her hope. But the memories of Liam's outbursts and the shadows of his anger were never far from her mind. The day of the custody hearing arrived with a heavy weight. Ava stepped into the courtroom, her baby cradled in her arms. On the other side of the room, Liam sat rigidly, his gaze fixed on her with a mix of defiance and fury. The tension was palpable, but Ava held her head high. For her daughter, she would face whatever came next. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as Ava settled into her seat, her hands trembling despite the firm grip she maintained on her daughter's blanket. She'd been warned this would be an uphill battle, but nothing could have prepared her for the intensity of seeing Liam across the room, his cold gaze fixed on her. It was as if every ounce of rage he'd ever felt was concentrated into this moment, aimed directly at her. Nicole sat beside her, calm and composed, exuding a quiet strength that Ava clung to like a lifeline. The judge entered, and the room fell silent as the proceedings began. Liam's lawyer was the first to speak, painting him as a concerned father unfairly alienated from his child. Ava bit the inside of her cheek to keep from reacting, her nails digging into her palm as the lies poured forth. Then it was Nicole's turn. With measured precision, she presented Ava's evidence. The threatening messages, the photos of her injuries, and the incident reports from the building's security. Claire, the nurse who had witnessed Liam's violent outburst at the hospital, took the stand next. Her testimony was clear and compelling, recounting every detail of that harrowing day. Leon Carter's actions on the day of his child's birth were not those of a concerned father, Nicole argued, her voice firm but controlled. They were those of a man who prioritized control over the safety and well-being of his partner and child. Ava Carter has shown nothing but courage and determination in protecting her daughter from harm. As the evidence mounted, Liam's confident facade began to crack. His lawyer tried to discredit Ava, accusing her of exaggerating the threats and fabricating the abuse. But Nicole's cross-examination was relentless, exposing inconsistencies in Liam's statements and underscoring the danger he posed. Finally, the judge spoke, his tone measured but resolute. The evidence presented leaves no doubt that Mr. Carter's behavior poses a significant risk to the safety of Ms. Carter and her child. Full custody is awarded to Ms. Carter, with Mr. Carter's visitation rights limited to supervised sessions, pending further review. Relief washed over Ava, so overwhelming that her vision blurred with tears. She clutched her daughter close as Liam's face twisted with fury, his hands balled into fists. He stormed out of the courtroom without a word, leaving a tense silence in his wake. As Ava stepped outside, the weight she'd carried for so long began to lift. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. The battle was far from over, but she had won this round. Her daughter's future was no longer clouded by Liam's shadow, a victory worth every tear, every moment of fear, and every ounce of strength she'd summoned. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Ava sat in her own space. The modest apartment wasn't much. A worn sofa, a second-hand crib, and the constant hum of traffic filtering through the window. But it was hers. She and her daughter were finally away from Liam's shadow, and for the first time, safety felt within reach. Mia had been instrumental in finding this refuge. Whether it was helping Ava navigate landlord interviews or holding the baby so Ava could take a moment to breathe, Maya remained a steady anchor. But Ava knew she couldn't rely on her forever. She needed to rebuild her independence for herself and her daughter. The first step was finding a job. Balancing job hunting with the demands of a newborn wasn't easy. Employers hesitated to hire someone with unpredictable availability, and Ava was often met with apologetic rejections. But she refused to give up. After weeks of perseverance, Ava landed a part-time position at a local cafe. It wasn't glamorous, but the flexible hours allowed her to provide for her daughter while still being present for her. At first, the cafe was just a job, a way to stay afloat, but over time, it became a lifeline. Her co-workers became a second family, offering her encouragement when the weight of her past felt too heavy to bear. One day, her manager pulled her aside and said, "You're stronger than you think, Ava. You've got a spark. Don't let anyone dim it." Despite these small victories, Liam's presence still loomed in Ava's life. Supervised visitation sessions were an ordeal. Liam always arrived with a veneer of charm that fooled the court-appointed supervisors, but failed to hide the menace in his eyes. His comments to Ava were laced with thinly veiled threats. "You think this is over?" he hissed during one session, leaning closer as the supervisor momentarily looked away. "You'll regret shutting me out." Ava refused to let him see her fear. Instead, she held her daughter close, focusing on her laughter and tiny hands as a source of courage. "Our daughter deserves peace," she replied firmly, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "And so do I." After each session, Ava would document every interaction meticulously, saving his texts and recalling his words in a small notebook. Nicole encouraged her to keep building the case. "The more evidence we have, the stronger our position becomes," she reassured Ava. But Liam's presence wasn't the only challenge Ava faced. As the weeks turned into months, the emotional toll of her past weighed heavily on her. Sleepless nights were filled with memories of his anger, his control, and her own helplessness. But every time despair threatened to overwhelm her, her daughter's laughter pulled her back. To combat the shadows of her trauma, Ava joined a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. The women there understood her struggles in a way no one else could. Their stories, though heartbreaking, were also inspiring, reminding Ava that she wasn't alone. Together, they celebrated victories big and small, whether it was standing up to an abuser or simply surviving another day. It was through the group that Ava reconnected with Ryan, an old friend who had always been a quiet presence in her life. He started visiting occasionally, helping her fix things around the apartment or playing with her daughter. His kindness was unassuming, never intrusive, and Ava began to find comfort in his presence. One evening, as Ava and Ryan watched her daughter toddle across the room, Ryan said softly, "You're doing an amazing job, Ava." She glanced at him, her chest tightening with gratitude. "I'm just trying to keep going," she replied, but deep down, she knew she was doing more than that. She was rebuilding a life she had once thought irreparably broken. Amid the strides Ava was making, Nicole uncovered a breakthrough. While reviewing Liam's financial records, she discovered hidden assets and transactions that suggested fraud. "This changes everything," Nicole said during a late-night phone call. "We'll use this to challenge his credibility in court." The discovery reignited Ava's resolve. Liam had always relied on manipulation and control, but now his facade was beginning to crack. Ava knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like the scales might tip in her favor. One night, as Ava rocked her daughter to sleep, she whispered a promise. "I'll protect you always, no matter what." Her baby's soft breathing filled the room, a quiet reminder of all that Ava had fought for and all she had yet to achieve. Ava's journey was far from over, but each step she took away from her past brought her closer to a future filled with strength, safety, and love. The tension in the air was palpable as Ava stepped into Nicole's office. A thick folder lay on the desk between them, brimming with financial documents, court records, and evidence Nicole had painstakingly gathered. Ava's hands trembled as she reached for a chair, her mind racing with a mix of hope and apprehension. "This is it," Nicole said, sliding the folder toward Ava. Liam's financial records show a clear pattern of fraud, hidden bank accounts, falsified tax documents, and embezzled funds. We're going to expose him in court." Ava nodded, her grip tightening on the chair's armrests. For months, she had documented every threat, every instance of manipulation, and every suspicious text. Now, with Nicole's discovery, it felt like the tide was finally turning. The court date was set for 3 weeks later, and the days leading up to it were a whirlwind of preparation. Nicole worked tirelessly, cross-referencing Liam's financial transactions and building a timeline of his deceit. Witnesses were contacted, and Ava's notebook of evidence became a critical piece of the case. As the date loomed, Liam's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He bombarded Ava with a barrage of texts, ranging from desperate pleas to outright threats. "You think you can take me down?" One message read, "You'll regret this, Ava." She forwarded every message to Nicole, who added them to their growing file of evidence. Ava doubled down on security measures at home, installing new locks and a security camera. Mia stayed over often, helping Ava manage her nerves and care for her daughter. "He's losing control," Maya said one night. "That's why he's lashing out. But he won't win, Ava. Not this time." The day of the hearing arrived, carrying with it a storm of emotions. Ava walked into the courtroom with Nicole by her side, her daughter safely at Maya's apartment. Across the room, Liam sat with his lawyer, his face a mask of anger and humiliation. Nicole's opening argument was razor-sharp. She laid out Liam's pattern of manipulation and dishonesty, presenting bank statements, hidden accounts, and forged documents as evidence. The court-appointed forensic accountant took the stand next, confirming that Liam had siphoned off funds to evade child support and taxes. When it was Liam's turn to defend himself, his lawyer painted a picture of misunderstanding and poor bookkeeping. But Nicole's cross-examination dismantled their narrative piece by piece. "This isn't incompetence," Nicole stated, her voice steady and commanding. "This is calculated fraud, designed to evade responsibility as a parent and as a citizen." As the proceedings continued, Ava found herself holding her breath. She knew the evidence was strong, but she also knew how skilled Liam was at twisting the truth. The climax of the hearing came when Nicole presented Liam's threatening messages. Each one was read aloud in court, the words dripping with venom and control. The judge's expression grew darker with every message, and by the time Nicole finished, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Finally, the judge spoke, his tone firm and unwavering. "The evidence presented today demonstrates a clear pattern of deception, manipulation, and abuse. Mr. Carter's actions not only endangered Ms. Carter and her child, but also violated multiple financial and legal statutes. Full custody will remain with Ms. Carter, and restitution for back child support and damages is hereby ordered. Furthermore, this court recommends that criminal charges be pursued for Mr. Carter's financial misconduct." The gavel struck, and the sound reverberated through the room. Relief flooded Ava's body as she turned to Nicole, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But as Ava left the courtroom, she caught a glimpse of Liam's face, his eyes burning with fury. He mouthed something at her, silent but unmistakable. "This isn't over." 2 days later, Nicole called with an update. "Liam's been arrested," she said, her tone steady but grim. The investigation into his finances uncovered additional crimes, embezzlement, and tax fraud. "He's facing prison time, Ava." The news was both a relief and a shock. For so long, Liam had been the storm cloud hanging over Ava's life, and now it felt like the storm was finally breaking. But Ava also knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Healing would take time, and the scars Liam had left, both visible and invisible, wouldn't fade overnight. That evening, as Ava rocked her daughter to sleep, she allowed herself a moment of peace. She had fought for her life and her daughter's future, and for the first time, she felt like they were truly safe. The storm had passed, but Ava's journey was far from over. She had found her strength, and now it was time to build a life defined not by fear, but by hope and resilience. The morning sunlight filtered through Ava's new apartment, casting a warm glow on the freshly painted walls. Her daughter giggled from her playmat, the sound filling the space with a joy Ava had almost forgotten was possible. After months of struggle, heartbreak, and fear, Ava finally felt the stirrings of hope. Liam's arrest had been a turning point. With him behind bars, facing years of imprisonment for his financial crimes and abusive behavior, Ava's world began to stabilize. But freedom didn't come without challenges. The emotional scars Liam had left behind still lingered, creeping into her thoughts during quiet moments. Yet, Ava knew she couldn't allow them to control her future. Maya remained a steadfast presence in her life, always ready with a comforting word or a helping hand. "You've come so far," Maya said one evening as they sat on Ava's small balcony, watching the city lights twinkle. "You've built a whole new life for yourself and your daughter." Ava nodded, her eyes misting with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied, "or without Nicole." Nicole, Ava's lawyer, had become more than just legal counsel. She had become a friend. Even after Liam's case was closed, Nicole continued to check in, ensuring that Ava had the resources and support she needed to move forward. "You're stronger than you know," Nicole had told her after the final court ruling. Those words had stayed with Ava, becoming a mantra during her darkest hours. Ava's life wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about rebuilding. She threw herself into her part-time job at the cafe, where her co-workers had become like family. With their encouragement, Ava began attending night classes, determined to earn a degree in social work. Her dream was to help other survivors of domestic violence, to offer them the same lifeline she had received. One day, during a class discussion about resilience, Ava found herself sharing her story. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, she felt a sense of empowerment. The room was silent as her classmates listened, their expressions a mix of admiration and sorrow. When she finished, the professor said, "You're living proof that it's possible to rise above even the darkest of times." That evening, Ava sat down to write a letter, not to Liam, but to herself. It was a promise to continue growing, healing, and providing the best life possible for her daughter. As she penned the final words, her daughter toddled over, her tiny hands reaching for Ava's lap. Ava scooped her up, holding her close. "I promise, sweet girl," Ava whispered, "I'll give you a life filled with love and safety." The nonprofit Ava had dreamed of during her darkest days began to take shape. With Maya and Nicole's support, she founded Safe Horizons, a shelter and advocacy group for survivors of domestic abuse. The organization offered counseling, legal aid, and temporary housing, ensuring that no one had to face what Ava had endured alone. The first time Ava walked into the shelter, she felt a wave of emotions: pride, hope, and a lingering sadness for the women who would come through its doors. "You've created something amazing," Maya said, standing beside her. Ava smiled, tears threatening to spill. "It's not just for me," she replied. "It's for all of us." As the years passed, Ava's life continued to evolve. Her daughter grew into a bright, curious child, her laughter a constant reminder of why Ava had fought so hard. Ryan, an old friend who had quietly supported Ava throughout her journey, became a steady presence in their lives. His patience and kindness broke through Ava's walls, and over time, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. One sunny afternoon, as Ava watched her daughter play in the yard, Ryan joined her on the porch. "You've built an incredible life," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Ava looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We've built it," she corrected, taking his hand. The scars of the past would always be a part of Ava's story, but they no longer defined her. She had reclaimed her life, transforming pain into purpose and fear into strength. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ava held her daughter close, her heart full of hope for the future. This is Ava's story, not of a victim, but of a survivor. And while her journey continues, she now faces it with courage, love, and the unshakable belief that brighter days are always ahead.